Welcome to the Star-Tribune. Give us a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thanks. My name's Curt Gottshall, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate as an independent candidate. And what sets me apart from the other politicians, simply put, I'm not one. I'm an airline pilot by profession who has recently been paying attention to the political situation and disgruntled with the way things are happening in Washington. The arrival of my young 8-month-old son has made me think about more than just my future. And I think there's a lot of room that we can improve things in Washington. The biggest item of contention that I have is corporate campaign financing. I think that the days of buying a politician and sending them to Washington should be a thing of the past. The politician should represent the people, not big business. Other things that are important to me are term limits. I think that once people are in office for 12 years, 2 terms for senators or 6 terms for the House, that they become Washingtonized and they lose touch with their people in Wyoming. And I think people really want term limits, and I'd like to do my best to legislate them for them. Other things that stick out to me are the NSA is currently collecting data and spying on us as domestically, and they're using a loophole from 1978 where a court decision on the law that was passed in 1978 is what they're using to authorize the NSA to do this data collection. And I think if we're going to try and do this as a government, we should handle it head on instead of loopholing our way around the law. I don't think that people agree with what's being done, and the amount of funding we're spending on it is quite vast. So I'd like to do something to try and tackle that. And last but not least, I'd like to return us to a representative democracy. And what I mean by that is if there's a vote in Washington that's required to be done by me on Wyoming's behalf, and it's not security sensitive or something that I can't disseminate, I would like to summarize it, have my staff and I summarize it, disseminate it throughout the state via TV, newspaper, radio, and internet, give all of their registered voters the opportunity to have a discrete login and password so that they could vote, and those who aren't internet savvy would have a dial-in and PIN code so that they could vote, and the people who choose not to vote or not get informed on the issues would be choosing for me to vote for them. For instance, if 50,000 people didn't vote, my vote would count for, excuse me, for 50,001, we'd tally up the vote and we have complete accountability and a true representative democracy.
So let's talk. You're running against an incumbent.
Yes.
Tell us about a vote Mike Yancey's made that with which you disagreed, and tell us why you would have voted differently.
Well, the last one he did before the break for the primary, we were having turmoil in Russia with the Ukraine, and we had an ambassador set up to be approved to be sent over there on our behalf so we could open a line of communication. And his stance on party politics and putting the Republicans ahead of the will of the people, he blocked the vote just out of spite. And we went through the whole break with no representation in Russia. That was a critical mistake that he made on the nation's behalf and on behalf of all the people.
So it's no secret that Washington politics are very polarized, as you're
Absolutely.
just talking about. How would you succeed in that environment and ensure that legislation that you support is passed?
Well, the easiest thing to happen as an independent is I don't have anyone pulling my strings. There's no majority or minority whip trying to keep me in line. I can sponsor bills that I want and bring them to the floor and force every member of the Senate to vote on them. And if they vote against the right thing to do, it'll become part of their voting record. They'll be used against them in the next election, and most likely they won't be in there anymore. For instance, removing corruption from politics by the campaign finance reform laws. If I put a true bill up there that's on merit and they vote against it because of party politics, they won't get another term.
So would you caucus with one party or another?
I would probably tend to caucus with the Republican Party because we're a Republican state, and that would be the right thing to do.
You've seen members of Congress happily take federal debt obligations to the brink of default. Would you back such a move in the future, and if so, under what conditions?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
So the federal debt obligations, looking at a debt ceiling.
Yes, and I've been contacted by the Coalition to Reduce Debt. They're an organization out of Virginia, I believe, and they've asked us to sign a pledge as new candidates. And what they asked for is that we promise not to increase or allow for any new spending without equal or greater cuts elsewhere. And I've signed that pledge, and I think it's a realistic thing that should be done to stop the overinflation of what's happening.
What's the name of the organization?
The Coalition to Reduce Debt.
And yeah, well, that sounds ideal.
Right. There's
obviously a lot of sausage that gets gets worked through in the process.
Absolutely, and we've got all these laws on the books with mandatory government spending that most of them need to be revisited because all this stuff sneaks in under the budget. It's just running the national deficit through the roof. There's lots of areas that we can focus on, things that we're spending that we don't need to, things that we should be spending on that we aren't, and without having all the information privy to me, we'd have to do everything on a merit base.
So let's talk about energy exports of coal and natural gas, obviously very important to
Right.
Wyoming. What would you do to help Wyoming's products make it to foreign customers?
Well, right now we have rules on the books guaranteeing interstate commerce, and they're not being enforced. Oregon is blocking our export of coal and choking the coal industry right here in Wyoming to a halt. Our production's down because we can't export, and that's something that needs to be dealt with on the federal level. It's intrastate. It's not something we can handle within the state government, so that's something that we would have to handle in Washington and enforce the rules that are on the books.
And how would that be done? You just say Oregon, sorry, you don't get to say no
Exactly.
to ports that are being built on their coast,
Right.
coal being shipped through their state.
Right. I mean, if we allow things like that to happen, what's to stop Wyoming from building a wall and not letting anything get across the tracks into Oregon? I mean, you got to keep the states moderated. That's the role of the federal government.
So, speaking of roles of the federal government, what role should the Environmental Protection Agency play, and do you think it's fulfilling that role?
I think it's oversteps its boundaries quite a bit. I think my personal view is that the EPA and all federal government agencies should be advisory in nature. I'm a firm supporter of the 10th Amendment, allowing the states to govern themselves. And if the EPA has a problem with something we're doing here in Wyoming, they should come into the state and go through the proper state channels for enforcement. They should have no enforcement authority over anything unless it's interstate. Kind of like the police department and the FBI. If things impact other states, then they should be involved more in a executive type situation. But on the state level, they should deal with the state.
On your website, you talk about how you're opposed to Common Core, and then you also advocate for a national standard for high school graduation. But then you also say the federal government shouldn't have any sort of say with education or education spending. How do you balance all these?
Well, it's an easy way to balance, really. I mean, the federal government should have a minimum standard for graduation to receive a diploma. But there's also many different issues on each state in education that they should be deciding themselves. And the bottom line is that the federal government should not be handing out any money to any of the schools. It should be collected on a local branch, local level, and dealt with through the school districts in our area. It shouldn't be going to the federal government and then coming back down. It should be just collected on a school level basis.
So we make money, and if you look at various federal inputs to Wyoming's budget, we actually make quite a bit of money as taxpayers into the federal government. Just because we are a low population state, and when you look through different rural programs, highways, education is a big one too, where you have federal money coming into the state.
Right.
Does that same philosophy extend to other areas as well?
It's pretty easy to stump the dummy here. I don't have the ability to do the research, but I mean, right at the tip of my hands. But everything would have to be done on a merit base. Each individual issue would have to be researched, and I can't answer every single one without prepare myself, but I think that the federal government has its fingers into too much. It shouldn't be handing out all the money. That's how we're getting in the trouble that we're in. Our debt ceiling's going through the roof, and if we have a school district here, back to the schools, if we have a school district here in Casper that needs so much money to run, you have school taxes here. You should maintain your own school yourself. It shouldn't go to the federal government and then get allocated back if you behave the way they want you to behave.
You also mentioned a return to the fairness doctrine. I'm wondering how you balance saying the feds should keep their fingers out of things, but then also saying they should mandate what should be allowed on media.
Well, right now we're in a situation where in the 2012 election year we spent $6.8 billion campaigning. And that money could go to a lot of much better causes than wasted airtime and taking ads out and billboards and all this other things. If we had a primary election or even a pre-primary election where people were allowed to given a small amount of time or an equal amount of time to display their platform, I think we'd have a much more representative of the people instead of representative of money.
So sum this all up for me. So I'm going to be sitting there staring at a ballot,
Mm-hmm.
looking at a couple of different couple different ovals to fill in. Why
Right.
should I vote for you instead of Mike Enzi?
Well, Mike Enzi ran, and he's had 3 terms now. He's seeking his 4th. And right now we're in a situation in Washington where we have the Democrats blaming the Republicans and the Republicans blaming the Democrats. And simply put, no one's doing their job. No one's doing the work. They're just, well, it's this person's fault or this person's fault. If you elect me as an independent, I'm going to go in there and do the job based on merit for the people of Wyoming. And that being said, I won't have anyone telling me what to do. There will be no oversight from the party. The only people telling me what to do will be the people of Wyoming.
So that was my last question. Feel free to wrap it up with a closing statement.
Sure. I really appreciate you guys having me up here, and I just ask the people of Wyoming to do your research, be informed, and make the right decision. And if you think that the way the government's been going for the last 18 years is the way you want it to continue, then re-electing the people we have in office is what you need to do. But I think we've been on a downhill slide for more than 20 years, and I think that we need some hardworking, honest people to step up and get involved. And I'm one of those, and I would like for you to give me your support.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and visiting with us.
Thank you.